and walked out the door, needing to clear my head. The air was crisp and cool, with a light scent of wood. Smoke wafted on the breeze. We walked towards the park. The path was quiet, only with the soft glow of the street lamps and the occasional flicker of car lights in the distance. Max trotted beside me, his steps steady and confident, matching my pace. I let him lead the way, trusting his instincts. As we wandered deeper into the park, I found myself in a secluded spot, mowing the dewy grass. The air echoed with the quiet sounds of the night. I sat on the bench. Max sat at my feet, his body warm against the cool of the night. The stars above were scattered brightly in the sky, like shards of glass. For a moment, I felt the weight of the world lift from my shoulders. Max moved to rest his head on my lap. I reached out and stroked his fur. The familiar movement kept me grounded. "You've always been here with me, haven't you?" I whispered, my voice continuing the silence of the night. He whimpered quietly in response, his tail wagging at the ground, and it was just a small thing, but it filled my chest with warmth and dispelled the lingering shadows of doubt and loneliness. Max was more than just my dog. He was my companion, my anchor, my eternity, in a world that often felt too big and too empty. As the minutes passed, I found myself speaking aloud the words that welled up like water from a dam. I told Max my fears, my doubts, the pain of a marriage that had become more about routine than connection. I talked about the nights I spent alone, the moments when his presence was the only thing that kept me from falling apart, and Max had always been there for me. His quiet presence assuring me that I was not alone, his devotion, his love, which was unlike anything I had ever known, and it filled my heart with a space in my heart that I had never realized was empty. The drive home was silent, a silence that felt full of meaning rather than empty. Max curled up in the passenger seat, his head resting on his paws, his breathing steady and present. I glance at him, a smile playing on my lips as I reach out and run my fingers through his fur. We're home. The house feels warmer, more inviting than it has in weeks. Max follows me to the couch and sits beside me. I curl up under the blankets. Our quiet company is enough to remind me that even in my loneliest moments, I'm not alone. I lean my head against the back of the couch, my fingers tracing the missing patterns in Max's fur. "You're my rock," I whisper. "You've always been my rock." Max moves closer, his body pressed against mine, his tail wagging gently. The connection between us is undeniable, a bond that transcends words or explanations. It's something I just know is real, and that's enough. As the minutes pass and the house grows quieter, and the world outside fades into the stillness of the night, I stay on the couch with Max. His presence is a steadying comfort, allowing me to drift off into a peaceful mist. No matter what the future holds, I know one thing: Max will be there. His loyalty is unwavering. His love is in a world that often feels unpredictable. For the first time in weeks, I've felt a sense of clarity, a quiet certainty. I'm not alone. As I drifted off to sleep, I was asking myself if this was okay. What we're doing is just me being weird, or is this normal? I just don't know. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Thanks. Sofa, feeling peaceful. Night fell again. The sky was dark and the air was dull. I walked to the sofa in the dark and Max followed me silently. Under the moonlight, I stroked his fur and whispered, "You are the only one left." He sighed, patted his tail, and looked up at me. The understanding in his eyes made my eyes wet. We snuggled quietly, and our hearts became closer. The next morning, the sun shone through the window. I woke up, and the shadow of last night was still in my mind. Max was already by the bed, his tail sweeping the floor. I scratched his ears, and he responded affectionately. This simple action was of great significance at the moment. After breakfast, my thoughts were wandering, trying to sort out the emotions in my heart for many years. Max used his company to let me face loneliness. Looking at him, I couldn't help but get close to him and kissed him. The atmosphere was subtle in an instant, and his tail swung quickly. Afterwards, I leaned on the cushions and whispered, "Max, what are we doing?" There was the same confusion in its eyes. Since then, Max has been with me while I folded clothes and cleaned. When night falls, I take him to the park and talk to him about my inner fears and confusion in marriage in a secluded place. He listens quietly and uses his warmth to dispel my gloom. On the way home, the car is quiet and warm. Max falls asleep. I occasionally glance at him and smile. When we get home, the house is warm and we lean on the sofa. I know that no matter what the future holds, Max will be by my side. But I can't help but ask myself, is this intimacy normal or weird? After breakfast, I found myself back on the couch with Max at my feet. The house was quieter today and felt less oppressive, more like a cocoon than a hollow hole. I let my fingers run through Max's fur. My mind wandered, trying to make sense of the emotions that had been churning inside me for years. I'd buried my feelings, pushed them beneath the surface, and let life run its course. But Max had a way of drawing them out and making me face my loneliness. I had tried so hard to ignore his unwavering loyalty. His silent understanding was a lifeline that I hadn't realized I needed until it was too late. Max was looking at me with those eyes again, and suddenly, I couldn't resist anymore. We had a relationship so intimate that I just had to give in. It was as if he was telling me that he could fill my lonely void with some excitement. I leaned towards him and he knew immediately that I was there. I kissed him, and there was a tension between us that I couldn't put my finger on. His tail moved very quickly, and of course I can't go into detail, but I can say that I let go of myself. I got down on my knees and turned around. Wow. When Max was doing his thing, I never thought it would be so good. The bond between us even strengthened what we were doing. It was amazing, I thought. 30 to 40 minutes later, he was done and I sighed, leaning back against the cushions. "What are we doing, Max?" I asked softly, my voice tinged with wonder and confusion. He looked up at me, his golden eyes meeting mine. For a moment, I felt like he was waiting for an answer as well. The rest of the day was spent in a mixture of tedious tasks and fleeting moments of lucidity. I folded laundry, cleaned the kitchen, and then walked Max through the block, all the while feeling the weight of our bond pressing down on me. I couldn't ignore it anymore, no matter how hard I tried. As the night wore on, I felt restless, a nervous energy churning through me that I couldn't quite shake. I grabbed Max's leash. I never thought that doing these things with my dog while my husband was away on a business trip would become the most exciting day of my life. It all started a few weeks ago when my husband was away on a business trip, leaving me at home with my Labrador Max. I had long been accustomed to the silence when he was away because of his busy work, which often lasted for days or even weeks. After all, this job supported our comfortable suburban life. Max has been with me for 5 years, growing from a furry puppy to my most loyal support. Whenever my husband is away, he always wags his tail, rubs against me, greets me with his eyes that seem to see through everything, and gives me irreplaceable comfort. One night, the house was empty and the feeling of depression came over me. I tried to dispel the loneliness with music, TV, and audiobooks, but all failed. After a simple dinner, I curled up on the sofa with a glass of wine in my hand, and Max lying at my feet. I stroked his fur and whispered, "You are the only one with me tonight." He snorted and tapped his tail on the floor. I looked through my phone. My friends' busy lives made me feel even more lonely. Max leaned his head on my legs at the right time. I smiled. At least I didn't feel so lonely. Alcohol was playing a role. I told him how much I missed my husband. I don't know if he noticed how long he was away from home. I know he's busy, but sometimes I really want him to be by my side. Max looked up. The understanding in his eyes made me sad. I asked again, "You understand, right?" The room became quiet, with only the hum of the refrigerator and his breathing. I felt his chest rise and fall, and there was a trace of peace in my anxiety. Late at night, I was ready to rest. Max followed me to the bed and curled up in the doghouse. I whispered goodnight and turned off the lights, but when I met his eyes, I felt inexplicably excited. I didn't pay attention to it at the time, but I didn't expect a series of unexpected things to happen later. The next morning, Max woke me up with his tail and urged me to get up happily. Seeing his energetic appearance, I felt a little relieved. After that, my husband's return date was postponed again, and I became more and more dependent on Max. One evening, I was washing dishes in the kitchen, looking at the warm light outside the window, but my heart was cold and lonely. I called Max softly and took him out without any purpose, just to escape the monotony. Along the way, Max leaned out of the window, his hair fluttering in the wind. His happiness infected me, and I smiled for the first time in a long time. We came to the nature reserve outside the city. The path was quiet. Birds chirped and leaves rustled. Untying the leash, Max ran away, his tail shaking like a small windmill. Watching him full of energy, the dullness in my chest was relieved a lot. I walked slowly along the path. The gravel creaked. Max shuttled through the trees, looking back from time to time. When I walked to the open space, I sat down. He sniffed beside me. I touched his ears and sighed. "You are my pillar." He looked up. His eyes were full of warmth. At that moment, I was no longer alone. The sun set. The afterglow sprinkled on the ground. Max and I sat quietly, as if the world was far away. On the way back, the sunset dyed the sky gorgeous. Max curled up in the passenger seat and fell asleep. I stroked him gently with a smile on my face. When we got home, the house was no longer empty. Max followed me into the house and lay down beside the sofa. I curled up on the